The wind skimmed low over the pasture, dragging dust and brittle grass across the quiet sanctuary grounds. Gray skies pressed close to the earth like a weighted blanket, and the horizon, usually lined with the slow sweep of the Mustangs, stood still. Nothing moved but crows circling above the fence line, its wings slicing the chill like a blade. The world held its breath, and so did she. Callie Morgan stood alone outside the quarantine pen, arms folded tightly across her chest, shoulders stiff from too many hours of silence. A week ago, she brought the mare down from the burned hills. A rescue, they'd called it. But Raven hadn't looked rescued. She hadn't even looked alive. The mare hadn't touched water. Not since the trailer doors had swung open. Not since Callie had whispered, "You're safe now," in the barn's dim light. For 3 days she stood like a statue, her ribs sharpening beneath skin dulled by ash and grief. Callie had seen trauma before, plenty of it, but this was something else. The mare wasn't just mourning. She was waiting. Callie adjusted the knit cap tugged over her ears, breath fogging in the cold. A flake of hay from her sleeve clung stubbornly to her wrist. "You've got to eat, girl," she murmured. Her voice barely carried past the fence post. "You won't last another day like this." But Raven didn't stir. Her head hung low, black mane tangled and heavy. Her legs trembled every now and then, just enough to betray how close she walked the edge. Yet her eyes remained fixed toward the barn, toward nothing and everything. The crunch of tires over gravel pulled Callie's gaze toward the drive. A battered red truck rolled to a stop, the engine sputtering once before falling into a quiet hum. She didn't need to see the plates to know who it was. Dr. Ellis stepped down, coat already dusted with road salt, his vet bag clutched loosely in one gloved hand. He looked like the kind of man who'd weathered more winters than he admitted, and less sleet than he ever complained about. "You called," he said simply, shutting the truck door behind him. Callie nodded once, then turned back toward the pen. "She hasn't eaten. Not a bite. Won't drink, either." Ellis joined her at the fence, peering over the worn boards at the mare, who might as well have been made of smoke and stone. "She let you near her?" "Let me lead her into the barn that first night," Callie said. "Hasn't moved since." Ellis's eyes narrowed. "You sure she's not colicking?" "She'd be rolling," Callie whispered, thrashing, moaning, "but she's just still." The vet waited a moment, studying the shape of the mare in the gray morning light. Grief can look like stillness, or it can be a scream without sound. Callie didn't answer. She couldn't, because something inside her, something quiet and heavy, knew exactly what he meant. Together they opened the gate and approached the pen slowly, Ellis murmuring gentle words, the same way he did with animals too wild to know human hands. Raven's ears didn't twitch. Her nostrils barely flared. "I've seen shutdowns like this," Ellis said under his breath. "But this one feels like she's holding something in." Callie crouched near the water trough, scooping her hand through the icy surface. "What if she's not holding something in?" she said softly. "What if she's waiting for something to come back?" Ellis said nothing at first. Then, "Let's get her under shelter. I want to check her heart. Blood pressure. Maybe she's hiding a deeper trauma." Callie nodded, though her hands felt heavier than they should. Leading Raven meant touching her again. It meant asking her to move when she clearly didn't want to. But when she stepped forward and gently touched Raven's shoulder, the mare didn't resist. She blinked once, and then lifted a trembling hoof. They walked together in silence, Callie leading, Ellis following close behind. Through the frost-hardened yard, across the weather-worn boards of the barn threshold. Raven moved like she was being pulled by memory, not muscle. Every step was effort and ache. Inside, the barn offered dim warmth and the faint smell of cedar shavings. Callie had prepped a stall with straw, blankets draped over the walls to muffle the wind. It wasn't much, but it was soft and it was quiet. Raven entered with a breath, so low it could have been mistaken for a sigh. Ellis moved quickly but gently. He checked pulse, Gum's hydration. He ran his hands down her spine and along her legs. Nothing obvious. No infection. No twisted gut. No wound to clean. But her heartbeat, though steady, was slow. Sluggish. "She's not failing," Ellis said finally, stepping back. Not yet, but she's conserving everything, like she expects to go to ground. Callie leaned against the stall door. Then she's giving up. Ellis met her eyes. Or she's waiting for something she lost. The thought echoed, unsettling, familiar. Callie had waited once. After her father died and the bank tried to gut the sanctuary he built from nothing, she'd waited, hoping someone would show up. Some miracle. But no one came. She kept it going on scraps and soul. Barely. And now she watched the horse doing the same. That night, Callie stayed in the barn, brought a cot and a thermos and a flashlight with a dying battery. She wrapped herself in an old horse blanket and let the sounds of breathing and straw and distant wind be her lullaby. At some hour between night and almost morning, Raven made a sound. Not loud, not long, but enough. Callie sat up, heart hammering. The lamp flickered beside her. She blinked hard into the shadows. Raven had moved, just inches. Her head was up. Her ears were pointed toward the barn door. Callie rose slowly, feet numb from sleep and cold. She crossed the door and pulled it open. Darkness met her, deep and complete. The moon had vanished behind clouds. The world outside the barn felt suspended, silent. But then she heard it, barely a whisper, a sound like breath and branches. And something else, something so soft it could only be called hope. Callie stepped out, her boots crunching frozen mud. She followed instinct more than sound, around the corner of the barn, past a stack of unused fencing, toward the edge of the tool shed. There, curled beneath an overhang, was something small, something breathing. She dropped to her knees before she realized it. Her hands brushed fur, thin, dust-covered, a foal. Its sides moved with shallow breath. Its legs curled beneath its body, and its eyes, when they opened, were wide with exhaustion. One was brown, the other, the color of storm clouds. Callie's chest tightened. She pulled off her coat and wrapped it around the foal, whispering nonsense, anything, everything. "You're all right now," she murmured, voice shaking. "You're all right." The foal didn't resist, just nuzzled closer. In the barn, Raven let out another sound, this one sharper, urgent. Callie stood, clutching the bundle against her, heart pounding, every part of her trembling from cold and something else, something too fragile to name. She opened the barn door and stepped into the glow of the lamp. Raven's head snapped up. Her breath caught audibly in her chest. Callie dropped the straw and placed the foal down. Mother and child locked eyes. Raven stepped forward, muscles stiff but suddenly alive with purpose. She lowered her head, touched her muzzle to the foal's shoulder. Callie watched Raven inhale, shiver, and press closer. Then, with a slowness that felt like the world restarting, the mare turned and walked to the water bucket. She drank and drank. Callie sank to her knees, tears tracking silent down her face. Ellis's voice came low from behind, surprised. "Well, I'll be damned." But Callie didn't speak. She didn't need to, because in that moment, the silence was no longer empty. It was full, brimming with what had been lost, and what had just been found. The morning rose slow and golden, like the world itself was tiptoeing around what had been found in the night. Sunlight leaked through the barn's warped slats in long, uneven beams, dust motes dancing lazily in the hush. Callie sat curled near the stall, her back against the rough wood, arms wrapped around her knees. Her coat hung from a nail, still damp from cradling the foal. She hadn't slept. Not really. Just watched. Raven hadn't moved much, but she no longer stood like stone. Her legs had tucked beneath her, her head draped protectively over the foal's flank. And the foal, too skinny, too small, lay nestled deep in the straw, chest rising and falling in shallow but steady rhythm. It was a fragile kind of peace, a breath caught between what was almost lost and what might still be saved. Ellis returned just after sunrise, thermos in hand, his gait slower than usual, as if he didn't want to shatter the calm. He stopped at the stall, exhaled hard through his nose, and gave a slow nod. "She drank." Callie nodded. "A whole bucket. Would have gone for more, but I held back. Didn't want to push her too fast." He leaned over the gate, squinting at the foal. Little one still hasn't stood? No. Tried once. Legs went out under her like straw. He didn't speak for a beat. Just watched. Then, that's not surprising. She looks barely a week old. Probably went most of it without milk. Callie's hands curled around her mug. I keep thinking, what if I hadn't walked outside last night? What if I ignored Raven's look? You didn't, he said simply, but it stuck to her anyway. The thought of what might have happened if the foal had been left in the cold another night, or if Raven had waited even a few more hours before giving up. Ellis opened his bag and stepped inside the stall. Let's see what we're working with. The exam was careful, gentle. The foal didn't resist, though her eyes stayed wide and wary, watching everything. Ellis checked her heart, her hooves, her gut. He moved with the kind of quiet assurance that made even frightened animals go still. When he finished, he knelt in the straw beside Callie, rubbing his hands clean with a cloth. She's weak, malnourished, mildly dehydrated, but not dangerously so. We'll need to supplement her with formula until Raven produces again, if she does at all. Callie's throat caught. What if she doesn't? He looked at her, eyes softening. Then we hand-raise her. It'll be harder, slower, but she's a fighter. That's clear. The foal let out a small noise, half whinny, half sigh, and nestled her nose into Raven's chest. The mare blinked down at her, exhaling slowly. She knew, Callie said more to herself than anyone. She knew her baby was out there. That's why she wouldn't eat. That's what she was waiting for. Ellis nodded. Animals grieve. People forget that. But it's real. Callie leaned back, brushing her hand over her face. She came down from the ridge during the fire. The others scattered, but she stayed near the canyon's edge. Refused to move at first. I thought she was disoriented. Ellis tilted his head. She was looking for a foal. Callie's voice dropped. She thought she lost her, and she was ready to die there. Silence sat between them, full and heavy. A few hours later, Callie stepped out into the pasture with a new task, mixing formula. The sanctuary's old feed room was a patchwork of dust and labels, jars of old medicine, torn hay bales, buckets stacked like rusting towers. She worked quickly but carefully, measuring powder, warming water over a camp stove she brought from home. Her movements were precise, almost ritualistic, as if every stir could change the outcome. Behind her, the door creaked open. You're up early. Callie turned to see Mia, her only part-time volunteer, stepping in with her usual oversized flannel and ponytail half undone. The girl looked like she hadn't slept, either. I heard what happened, Mia said. Social media's already calling it a miracle. Callie half laughed. Of course it is. They want to send donations. People are asking about the foal. She doesn't even have a name yet. Mia smiled gently. Then maybe you should give her one. Callie stirred the bottle again, then poured the warm milk into a sterilized syringe. Her eyes lingered on the steam rising. Dusty, she said finally. She came out of it, didn't she? All that ash, the dirt, she survived in the dust. Mia's smile widened. Dusty it is. They returned to the barn together. Dusty blinked up from her nest of straw, head lifting slightly. Raven's eyes followed the bottle in Callie's hand, nostrils flaring. But she didn't tense. She didn't back away. Callie knelt slowly, whispered reassurances, and pressed the bottle gently to Dusty's lips. It took effort, coaxing, but the foal eventually latched. Weakly, tentatively, but she drank. For the first time since Raven had arrived, the air inside the barn seemed to breathe with them. By late afternoon, the word had spread farther than Callie expected. A reporter from the local paper showed up, boots too clean and questions too rehearsed. Callie barely tolerated him, answering briefly, her focus never straying far from the stall. He snapped pictures of Raven and Dusty, scribbled notes about the fire, about the bond, about miracles in the wild. She hated the way he said it, like it was a headline instead of a heartbeat. After he left, Ellis returned with a bag of colostrum powder and a promise of vet tech interns who might want hours. Callie barely kept up with the names, the offers, the messages flooding in. For once, people wanted to help, and that terrified her. because she didn't know how long this moment would last. How long Dusty would keep drinking. How long Raven would stay steady. They were healing, but not healed. And the sanctuary had always lived on the edge of collapse. One storm, one fire, one mistake, and everything could unravel. That night, Callie lay again on the cot near the stall, a notebook open in her lap. She wasn't writing, just staring at the page. Outside, the wind had died down. Crickets hummed in the grass. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled, a long, low note that curled around her ribs and squeezed. Raven shifted. Dusty, now nestled tight against her belly, let out a small bleat. Callie looked up. She couldn't say why, but something in the way Raven was watching her. It was different. The fear was still there, yes, but underneath it, something steadier, almost like trust. She set the notebook down. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "we'll move you both to the upper pen. It's warmer. More sun. You like it there." Raven blinked slowly. Callie smiled. Not wide, not certain, but real. As she reached up to turn off the lantern, she paused. Something had shifted. Not much, but enough. Enough to believe there was still more story left to tell. Sunlight soaked the sanctuary like honey spilled across the land, casting long amber streaks over frostbitten grass and freshly raked straw. The old wooden slats of the barn glowed like polished bone. It was the first truly warm morning in weeks, and the change in the air was subtle but alive, like something dormant had started to wake again. Callie stood at the paddock gate. Boots scuffed, flannel sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her eyes tracked Dusty as the foal clumsily tested her legs across the soft straw, knees wobbling with every step. The movement was awkward, unsure, but it was movement. That alone was cause enough to breathe easier. Raven trailed just behind her, never more than 2 steps away. The mare moved with new steadiness now, her ribs still visible, but her posture no longer slumped by grief. Her head was higher. Her ears flicked to the sound of birds overhead. She watched the foal with something close to curiosity, maybe even pride. "They're getting stronger," Ellis said as he approached, hands tucked into the pockets of his canvas coat. Callie nodded, not taking her eyes off the pair. "It's slow, but it's happening. They're ahead of where I expected. Honestly, I didn't think Dusty would make it past the first night. She's stubborn. So's her mother." Callie gave a soft chuckle, but it was weighted with memory. There was a tension sitting beneath her bones today, a thought she'd been trying to outrun for days. The question that kept circling back whenever the barn got too quiet. What if this is as far as it goes? What if the miracle ends here? Ellis must have sensed it. They've still got to climb ahead. You know that. "I do," Callie said, wrapping her fingers tighter around the gate rail. "But so do I." The words came out before she meant to say them. She heard them land, heavy and real, and didn't try to reel them back. "I've been thinking about Dad a lot," she continued. "How he built all this with nothing but salvaged lumber and a wild idea. How he used to say the land would keep us as long as we didn't turn our backs on it." Ellis leaned against the gate beside her. "And now," Callie hesitated. "Now I'm not sure it's enough." She didn't cry. She didn't have the energy. But there was something hollow behind her voice, like part of her was already preparing to say goodbye. Ellis didn't try to talk her out of it. He never did. Instead, he pulled something from the inside pocket of his coat and handed it to her, a folded paper with a sticky note on top. "What's this?" "Grant application. Wildlife rehab funding. A friend upstate forwarded it. They're looking for programs with youth outreach. At-risk teens. Kids who need grounding. I don't have a program. But you have the bones of one," he said. "And sometimes bones are all you need." She stared at the form for a long time. It felt absurd. Imagining a future with interns and classes and government backing when just a week ago she'd been praying one broken mare would eat. But Dusty was walking now. That had once felt impossible. 2. By early afternoon, the sanctuary felt busier than usual. Word had spread. Again, the social worker who ran a youth program in town brought 3 kids out to visit. Quiet ones, eyes shadowed with things no child should carry. They didn't speak much, but they watched. One boy, no more than 12, stood with his fingers laced tight over the fence rail, eyes fixed on Dusty as she took careful steps beside her mother. "She looks like she's going to fall," he muttered. "She might," Callie said gently, "but she keeps getting up." The boy didn't reply, but something in his shoulders shifted, just a little. Later, while the sun still slanted gold through the clouds, Callie walked the property alone, past the feed sheds, past the patch of woods that marked the sanctuary's back boundary. Her father's old tool bench sat under a lean-to, covered in dust and leaves. She brushed a hand over the top, revealing a name carved into the edge in jagged, uneven letters. Callie plus Dad equals Hartwood. It was a name he gave the ranch when she was still small enough to ride on his shoulders. Hartwood Sanctuary. She'd painted the sign herself when he died, but the paint had long since peeled off. Now, it was just the wood and the ghosts. A sharp whinny cut across the pasture. Callie turned fast, heart leaping. "Dusty!" She broke into a run, boots thudding hard over the frozen ground. The barn doors loomed wide, and her breath puffed in clouds as she rounded the corner. Ellis was already there, crouched low beside Dusty, who lay sprawled awkwardly in the straw. Her chest rose and fell too quickly. Raven stood over her, agitated, hooves shuffling. "What happened?" Callie asked, breath ragged. "She went down too fast. Might have overdone it." "Is she in pain?" "Not yet, but she's struggling." Callie dropped to her knees beside Ellis, her hands hovering just above Dusty's side. She didn't want to touch her, didn't want to confirm how fragile she felt beneath the skin. "What do we do?" Ellis didn't answer right away. He placed a stethoscope against the foal's ribs. "Listen." Moved it. "Listen again." "She's not crashing," he said finally. "But we're on the edge. We need fluids. Now." "I'll get the 4," Callie said, already moving. The next hour blurred. "Tubes, saline," Gauze's gentle hands. Dusty didn't fight. She just lay there, blinking slow, her mismatched eyes flickering between sleep and shadow. Callie didn't let go of her hoof the whole time. As evening fell, the storm didn't come from the sky, but from within, fear, tight and raw, churning in her stomach like fire. The sanctuary lights glowed dim, lanterns swaying slightly in the rafters. The generator hummed its low, steady song. And inside the stall, the world had narrowed to a heartbeat. Ellis finally leaned back, pressing the last tape into place. "We'll know by morning," he said quietly. "She's stable for now." Callie nodded, throat too tight for words. He left her alone with them then. Dusty still lay curled in the straw. Raven stood over her, touching her nose to her daughter's neck in rhythmic, silent reassurances. Callie sat with her back against the stall wall, legs stretched out, hands numb with cold and worry. She closed her eyes, tried to summon her father's voice in her head, tried to remember what he'd say on nights like this. But there was only silence. Then a sound, barely more than breath, the smallest shift of weight. Callie opened her eyes. Dusty had moved, just an inch, one front leg pushing forward, then dragging slightly back. Her head lifted, barely, but it lifted. Callie's heart clenched. "You're not done, are you?" she whispered. Raven bent down and breathed into Dusty's mane. And slowly, so slowly, the foal's ears flicked back. Callie sat still as stone, afraid to break whatever spell had been cast over them. Outside, the wind had picked up again, rustling leaves like whispers. She didn't know what morning would bring, but in that moment, in the quiet between storms, she believed they would reach it. Somehow, together. Night passed slow, stitched together with shallow breaths and the rustling shuffle hooves and straw. The barn had turned into something holy, warm with lantern glow, alive with silent prayers. Callie barely moved from her place beside the stall, knees drawn tight to her chest, a blanket draped across her shoulders. Her muscles ached, her mind frayed from waiting, from watching. Every time Dusty exhaled, she held her own breath a little too long. Every flutter of the foal's eyelids, every twitch of her leg, became a beacon Callie clung to with ferocious hope. By dawn, the wind had quieted. A heavy stillness lay over the land like fresh snow, even though the frost had long melted. Outside, the hills glowed soft pink under the waking sky. Inside, Dusty stirred again. Not just a slight shift of a body fighting sleep, but something stronger. Her front legs pushed forward through the straw. The movement labored but deliberate. Callie sat forward, hands clenched, mouth dry. Raven, standing sentinel all night, stepped back, just one step, but it felt like a leap of faith. She gave her full space. Dusty braced herself. Then, slowly, she rose. Her legs trembled violently under her weight, her spine dipping with the effort. But she stood, wobbling and hunched, like a newborn learning the world for the first time. Callie didn't realize she was crying until the tears cooled the corners of her mouth. Raven let out a low nicker, stepping closer now, brushing her nose against Dusty's side. Callie covered her mouth with one hand, the other still clutching the blanket, as if her whole soul might spill out if she let go. Ellis appeared quietly in the doorway, his coat zipped up against the morning chill. He paused when he saw the scene, then moved beside her and crouched down. She stood, Callie whispered. "I can see that." She stood, Ellis. He nodded slowly. "And she's going to do it again." There wasn't much more to say. The silence between them carried everything words couldn't reach. By mid-morning, Dusty had managed a few steps around the stall. They were clumsy, hesitant, but hers. Each one brought Raven closer, their bodies brushing like a current passed between them. Callie stayed nearby but didn't interfere. She was learning, just like they were, that sometimes presence was enough. Mia arrived with feed buckets and a packet of fresh donations, more than Callie expected, enough to cover supplies for a month. There were letters tucked in the envelopes, too, some from local kids who'd visited the sanctuary once with their school, others from strangers, people who'd read about Raven's story in the local news and felt moved. One note simply read, "She didn't give up, so I won't either." Callie folded that one into her pocket. Later that afternoon, under a patchwork sky, she led Raven and Dusty out to the upper pasture for the first time since their reunion. Dusty hesitated at the barn's edge, her hooves sinking into soft mud, ears flicking at the wide world. Callie knelt beside her, murmuring gently. "You don't have to run yet," she said. "You just have to walk." Dusty stepped forward, one hoof, then the next. The pasture stretched ahead, uneven but open, bounded by old oak trees and a fence her father had built one summer when the land was dry and wild. Raven followed close, the grass brushing her ankles, her breath coming steady. They grazed together under a broken sky. Callie stood by the fence, arms folded across her chest, chin tucked down against the wind. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. It was the kind of day the land gave when it wanted you to know it still remembered what saw felt like. Ellis returned in the early evening with a truck full of hay and 2 vet techs who looked like they'd never touched straw before. He stayed behind after they left, standing by the truck bed while Callie tossed down bales. The rhythm was comforting, predictable, the weight of it solid in her hands. "You still thinking about that grant?" he asked, brushing hay off his sleeves. "Every night." "You gonna apply?" Callie hesitated, then glanced toward the pasture. Dusty was lying in the grass now, legs tucked beneath her. Raven curled protectively nearby. "I think I have to," she said. "For her, for the sanctuary." Ellis gave a quiet nod. "It's a good thing. Structure. Help. I don't want to change too much." Change isn't always a threat, Callie. Sometimes it's a second chance. The wind tugged at her hair. She let it. They stood together like that, side by side, as the sky dimmed and the shadows lengthened. Back in the barn that night, Callie lit the lantern and walked the stalls in silence. She paused beside the empty one. The space Raven had once stood in, hollow and half dead. The straw was fresh now, the trough clean, the gate secure. But it wasn't just the stall that had changed. Callie pulled her notebook from the shelf and sat on the old bench in the corner, fingers stiff with cold. She stared at the blank page, pen hovering. Then she wrote, Dusty's first steps, Raven's first drink, a mother who refused to live without her child. The page filled slowly, each word deliberate, not just for memory, but for record, for the grant, for the future. She wrote until her hand cramped. Then she closed the notebook, placed it gently beside the lantern, and leaned back. The barn creaked softly, familiar and safe. Dusty stirred in her sleep. Raven, too. Outside, the stars emerged one by one, scattered like breadcrumbs across the dark. Callie didn't know what tomorrow would bring. The grant might fall through. The foal might stumble again. The bills wouldn't disappear. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was losing ground. She stood, stretching her arms overhead. Then she walked the stall and sat beside Raven, her back against the warm boards, her shoulder brushing the mare's flank. "You held on," she whispered. Raven shifted slightly, leaning into her. Callie closed her eyes. Outside, the wind moved gently through the grass, and somewhere beyond the barn, the hills waited, still scarred from fire, but healing, like everything else. And for the first time since the flames, since the silence, since the mare had refused food and the foal had curled into dust, there was peace. Not perfect, not permanent, but real.